Hi, this is Everett Crockett, and welcome to TRS, Your Retirement in Focus. Since the inception of this podcast, we have had some absolutely outstanding guests to stop by and share a wealth of truly beneficial information with us. Over the 3 years that the podcast has been produced, we have been able to compile some useful metrics about our listeners and the topics and guests that they connect with most. Well, today, we have the honor of spending time with one of our most popular guests, Dr. L.C. Buster Evans, the Executive Director of Teachers Retirement System of Georgia. Dr. Evans, how are you, sir?
Everett, I'm doing fantastic, and I hope that you're doing well. I want to say thanks to you for allowing me to come back on your podcast. You know, I am absolutely one of the biggest fans of this podcast. Didn't even know what a podcast was 7 years ago. But since I've found them, they are a part of my everyday life, and I'm so thrilled that here at the Teachers Retirement System of Georgia, we are one of the few retirement systems that I know that actually has a podcast reaching our over 500,000 members here in Georgia and beyond. So thanks for having me back.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, I know you know this already, but it's always a pleasure to have you in the studio. Now, Dr. Evans, as we wind down 2022, there were and are even yet still so many changes, process improvements, awards, and other exciting things to have happened this year. What are some of the things that you are excited about that have happened at TRS this year?
Everett, I could talk about this almost all day long, but I do have several things that I do want to talk about. First of all, I want to congratulate you, our Director of Outreach and Communications, Winston Buckley, with where we have gone with social media to include this podcast. If you look at where we were just even 3 or 4 years ago and what we're doing today, we're literally reaching thousands of our members through the podcast, through our Facebook and YouTube, with content that is there on demand and is being accessed literally by people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in Georgia and beyond. So I'm so proud of the fact that we have embraced social media, and I think we're doing an even better job now communicating because we're doing the work that we've always done, but we are using some technologies of the 21st century and of the day to reach a new and growing membership. Secondly, I can tell you, we just a couple of weeks ago experienced the second graduation or the graduation of our second LDIP cohort. That is our Leadership Development Institute program. We had about 19 graduates in our cohort 2. We had about 22 in our first cohort. So we've had nearly 25% of the folks who work here at Teachers Retirement System of Georgia go through a leadership development program which is designed to help all of us grow as leaders, to prepare our personnel for being able to take the next step. And it's so heartwarming to see a number of them who are getting more and more engaged in the work of the Teachers Retirement System of Georgia. So our LDIP cohort was another one of those things. As I was coming in the building earlier today, I was also thrilled to be reminded of our wellness initiative. This is something that came out of our Employee Advisory Committee when we talked about what are some things that we can do which will further engage and be of benefit for our personnel here. Anyway, our wellness initiative is something that is so critical because when we help improve our own physical being and our physical fitness, not only we're doing something for ourselves, we're actually making us even better able to do the work that we do professionally as well as helping ourselves personally. So I'm thrilled to see what we've done with the Wellness Initiative. And even earlier this year, back in June, we had our first TRS 5K walk. Now, we didn't have a run, but we had a walk. But we had amazingly, I think nearly like 50 of our team members show up on a Saturday to drive to the office on a day that they didn't have to have fun, to be involved in a fitness activity, which basically just demonstrates that this is another way that we're bringing our folks together. So I'm so thrilled with our wellness initiative. And you know, another area that I've been proud of during the last year has been the stability and growth in our workforce. You would have probably had to not pay attention to any media or not read any newspapers to have heard the term the Great Resignation.
Yes.
You know, we've heard in some companies that there's been a significant loss, people quitting their jobs, going to do something else, getting promotions. And you know what? That was a concern of ours, Everett, because our team members here are our most valuable asset. And it costs us money. when we lose team members because we have to train people, we have a gap, and it's just we lose the ability to do what we do best, and that is to service our members. But we watch this very, very closely, but the reality of it is we did not lose. Well, I mean, we may have lost a couple of folks who might have left us, and that's going to happen, and we understand that. But the reality of it is, I think that was significant for us to have gone through this time where a lot of people were looking to go to work someplace else, and we were able to retain the vast majority of our workforce. And so I'm thrilled with that. And that tells me, while we're not perfect and we understand that we're trying to take into consideration the well-being of the people who work here at the Teachers Retirement System of Georgia. I'll mention one more briefly, and I'll probably talk more about this in a minute, but that is our state charitable contribution program. We had another record-setting year, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but when I look at all of those kind of things, for me as executive director, it's kind of like a barometer or a pulse. How are things going here? Are there red flags? Are there yellow flags? Or are all flags green? And again, while we would be first to admit that we're a continuous work in progress, I'm so thrilled that these are 5 indicators that I've looked at that talk about what we do at Teachers Retirement System of Georgia as a family, serving our educator family all across the state.
Wow. Great feedback right there. And so you did mention one thing I wanted to have a little follow-up feedback on, and that's the Great Resignation. I know a lot of people got spoiled, and that may not be the right term, but I've talked to several friends of mine who say, you know what, if I can't work remote now, I'm not taking a job. And so I think TRS did an excellent job. TRS switched gears and did what they needed to do to not only keep our work going, but to keep our employees happy here at TRS. So hats off to our executive team for that. So.
Well, Everett, thanks for sharing that. And we try to get feedback around this. And what we really have found, for the most part, our people like some in-office presence.
Sure, flexibility.
And we also feel like for us to be able to continuously build culture, you got to be able to see people. You got to be able to have human interaction that's a part of life. And we've even brought a couple of people into the organization that joined us because they shared they did not like working remotely 100% of the time. So it's a balancing act.
There it is.
And we're going to continue to try to make sure that we get the right balance. But most importantly, we believe that we're doing as good or even maybe a better job making sure that we're taking care of the business of the Teachers Retirement System of Georgia with this blended or hybrid work model.
I agree. Put me down in a category that says we're doing better. Now, what was one of the most discussed topics of interest in the past year?
You know, every year as we work with the Georgia legislature, we always see some form of retirement legislation that's introduced. And sometimes that's a little bit scary. And sometimes we see things get introduced that maybe cause us concern. But there was one bill that passed in the previous session of the Georgia legislature, and that was House Bill 385. And that particular bill was a bill that, very briefly, that allows some of our retired educators who have been retired for a year in the areas of a critical needs area, such as math or foreign language or science or special education, to go back to work full-time and still draw their benefit. That bill has been a bill that was in the works for several years. And so we've had a lot of communication with membership, with our professional organizations, even among our staff about how we adjusted with House Bill 385. What I love about this particular bill, and we've talked about this bill on the podcast before, but this was a win-win because even though we only have a little over 200 of our retirees who've embraced coming back to work under this legislation, I know that we've got over 200 classrooms in this state who've got one of the best teachers available to be before these kids. And that, to me, is good educational policy. So we've had a lot of conversation about it, and I have every idea as we go into this upcoming legislative session, we will give a feedback to the legislature about how it's been used, and perhaps even if there's some ways that maybe it can be improved to open it up for maybe a few more educators to make sure that, again, we have the best quality teacher available to teach our students here in the state of Georgia.
Excellent. Now, Dr. Evans, as with all things financially centered, there are ebbs and flows, highs and lows. How has the performance of the TRS fund been this year?
Well, Everett, I would pause and say, can we define the term year? It has been, when you look at the last 12 months calendar standpoint, it has really been a lot of volatility. If a person has a 403B or a 401k and has money in the equity markets, they know that it has been somewhat of a challenging ride. So when we look at the past 12 months and when we look at the past calendar year, it's not been very good. But we ended the year ending on June 30th down in our assets over 12%. That wasn't good. Now, I say that, but if you will remember the year before, we had a record year with returns at over 28%.
Yes, we did.
And that is the nature of the equities market. We're going to typically have a down year about once every 4 years if history is a repeater of itself, and typically it does. So we experience that. If you look at where we're at calendar year to date here in our fund, we're down about 10%. But if you define the year looking just at our fiscal year to date since July 1, we're actually up over 5%. So we're coming back, and that's what we expect. It's never fun when you see the assets of the organization or the assets of your own personal 401k or 403b go down. But as we think long term, we have reasons to be optimistic, and we're looking forward to this being a good year. Hopefully we will see us end the year in positive territory, and we're definitely headed there at this particular point in the year.
Excellent. I believe we will too. So, well, Dr. Evans, you stole my thunder on this a little bit earlier, but I'm going to cover it anyway. Very recently, I saw an exciting article which reflected how so many of TRS's employees were able to connect to the issues and nonprofit organizations that they care about. Does TRS have any awards of recognition that you would like to share?
Everett, I love it when you tee it up that way. Makes me think that I'm on a golf course on a warm spring day, and 1 out of 20 times I hit it in the fairway.
Me and you both.
But the reality of it is, I want to mention two things that I'm especially thankful for. And the first is, we received a Certificate of Excellence in Financial Certification Reporting. For us, this is like the 32nd consecutive year since we've received this certification of excellence. And for me, this is so important. We deal and handle the assets of over $90 billion. We oversee the retirement plans. Right now, over 145,000 beneficiaries. We have over 500,000 total members. We're entrusted with a great responsibility.
Yes.
And nothing is as good as our credibility as we provide quality service with overseeing the finances and overseeing these accounts and making sure that it's reported professionally and accurately to our auditors and to all of those people who look at our information each year. I'm so thrilled with this because once again, we can demonstrate that we've done the work with credibility and with the level of professionalism that I think that we should be held to, quite frankly. The second one is the Governor's Award for the State Charitable Contribution Program. Well, back earlier in the spring, Everett, we received notification that we had been given the 4th consecutive Governor's Award for our particular category in participation. Now, what gets me excited about this are so many things. But first of all, to receive this award 4 consecutive years speaks very, very well of our organization, that we were not a one-hit wonder, that we've made this a part of our organizational culture. We believe in giving. We believe in giving back. We believe that to whom much has been given, much is expected. And so our folks of our organization have made this a part of our organizational culture. Everett, over the last 5 years, we have contributed over $250,000.
Oh, wow.
Just last month, we wrapped up our latest campaign. We raised a record amount of money with over $59,000 being contributed to a number of agencies. Our partnering organization was the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. No more deserving, no more fantastic organization for us to have as a partner as they serve really the body of people that we're here to ultimately help, and those are the kids.
Yep.
And so I'm thrilled with that. We certainly anticipate that we will be getting a 5th Governor's Award. It reminds me the 1981 Pittsburgh Steelers football team under the leadership of Terry Bradshaw when they were going for their 5th consecutive Super Bowl, and their theme was one for the thumb in 81. Well, we're going for one for the thumb, and I'm so excited about that. It's so good for our people to be involved in doing something that's giving back. It brings us together. We have an awful lot of fun with everybody chipping in and being a part of that and being able to celebrate that. So you'll hear more about this in the coming months. This is just one of the first formats that we've been able to share this outstanding information, but I think it's great. So thank you for allowing me to talk about 2 things out of many that I'm really, really thankful for, but those are 2 recognitions that we've received during the past year that I'm especially proud of.
Wow, well deserved. And hats off to all the good people here at TRS who have given of themselves and their resources to help others. I'm reminded of a very famous restaurant chain that I frequent on a regular basis for lunch, and they're not even open 7 days a week. But I know one of the parts of their culture is how they give, and it never seems to hurt them. They seem to outsell everybody also. So I know it's always been said to me, it's better to give than to receive. Early in my life, I didn't believe that, but I can honestly say as of today, I concur with that. Now, Dr. Evans, 3 years ago this month, what we now know as the pandemic began. Would you say that things are back to normal, or is there just a new normal?
Everett, I believe we have a new normal. So much changed with the pandemic. We've used terms like pivot and adjusted and all those types of things. I really like the term new normal because I think it reflects that life is dynamic. Life is changing. All of us have changed even in the last 3 years. We've all gotten older. Hopefully we've gotten a little bit wiser. But here with the new normal that we're experiencing, it's really been good for most every component of our agency because we are doing some things differently that chances are we would not have done had we not experienced the pandemic. I can point out several of those things, and with our outreach and communications group under Winston Buckley 3 years ago, before the pandemic, we had our first pilot where we did virtual counseling sessions.
Wow.
Where we got with people over the computer, over a video-based platform, and we were able to meet just like we were face-to-face. We had no idea that would become the main way within 2 months' time that we would be providing counseling services to people. So here we are in the new normal in 2022, that while we are meeting face-to-face with a number of our people, the preferred option for many of our people continues to be the virtual platform. So we're providing counseling services either in person or virtually, or either by the telephone. Those are things that we thought that we ought to be doing, that had we not experienced the pandemic, quite frankly, we might not have been pushed to do something like that. I think that we have to be cognizant that at all times, the health of our organization and culture in our organization is important. And so we've constantly reflected about how do we continue to build on the positive culture of our organization as a result of this pandemic. And so we've been able to use the same type of platforms that we've just talked about, where we use the virtual platforms as well as face-to-face. And we also have to know, as we talk about our new normal, we have to continuously articulate about how to be able to articulate why we exist. And we exist to serve our over 500,000 active and retired members. We exist as a component of critical educational policy that works to help attract and retain quality educators in the workforce. That's why we exist. So when we talk about the new normal and we embrace such things as the virtual meetings that we do for counseling purposes and the virtual training sessions that we're doing, and we have days in the past, if we held a session, we may only be able to fit 30, 40, or 50 people in a room. Now we've had a hiccup or two along the way, but we have had events, we've had well over 1,000 people online getting that content. that would have never happened in my mind as quickly as it would have happened anyway, had it not been for the fact that we experienced something that while we wish we didn't experience in the pandemic, but we took that, we made those adjustments, and it has forevermore changed the way that we do work here at the Teachers Retirement System of Georgia. And so this new normal actually feels pretty good to me right now.
A positive pivot, that's what I'll call it. Now, Dr. Evans, before I ask you the next question, I want to congratulate you on your 6th year anniversary of being at the helm of TRS. Now, having said that, we understand that change is an ever-present part of our world, as you just stated. What has changed most about TRS since you started?
Well, Everett, I had no idea that you were going to phrase a question exactly that way, pointing out 6 years, but I actually have 6 things that I'm going to share right quickly.
Look at that.
And that is purely by coincidence. First of all, I want to talk about the cohesiveness of our team. You know, there was a guy who wrote a book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. In that book, he talks about a dysfunctional organization has a leadership team that is not cohesive. I feel like that we have a more of a cohesive team because we've all been working on that over the 6 years. So I think our team cohesiveness is something that I feel really, really good about. Secondly, growth among our personnel. We've talked about our Leadership Development Institute program, but I could talk about the implementation of our learning management system and about how we do business acumen training, helping to cross-train personnel within the organization. So I think that we've grown our personnel, and we've always believed in training, but we're using new platforms for helping people to get the type of training that they need to be able to add value to themselves and allow them to add value to the organization. The third change that I would talk about is the hybrid work environment. We mentioned that earlier. We believe that this hybrid work environment is here to stay. There are some agencies that elected to go completely remote. We continue to feel that the hybrid work environment allows us to do what we're doing right now, be in the studio.
Sure.
And while we could do it remotely, you know, I like being able to look at you face to face. It actually helps me communicate better, to be totally honest with you. So the hybrid work environment, as we continue to make a success out of that. The fourth thing that has changed that I just get excited about every week because I get to go there every week, and that is the Macon satellite office.
Oh, yeah.
You know, for years, anybody who wanted face-to-face counseling could either do it by coming to Atlanta or being at one of our events done by our outreach and communication. But we have an office in Macon now that has been up and going now. This is its 3rd year. And we literally are providing counseling services for people in the lower 2/3 of the state. So they don't have to come to Atlanta.
All the way there.
And we've taken 3 of our outstanding retirement counselors, putting them in Macon, and I tell people almost every week and refer to them. I was actually at an event this Saturday, met a teacher from the Bibb County area, and I said, well, you know now, we have an office in Macon. You don't have to go to Atlanta for retirement counseling. She says, I know right where it's at, and I'm planning to go there.
Wow.
And man, it just excites me. That's a fourth thing that I'm really, really excited about. Retirement planning options. I referred to this earlier, but again, we're doing things now by having the virtual as well as the in-house or phone counseling as well that we didn't do 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're better and we're able to provide a better service to our membership because of that. And then the last thing that I had written down is basically education and communications, whether it's educating and providing educational and training opportunities for our staff or providing educational and training opportunities for our membership. I think literally we are reaching many, many more people because we're using multiple platforms. So those are 6 of the things that I think are different. And I think those are 6 of the things that have made us better as an organization and that we want to continue to build upon to even get better as we serve to meet the needs of our wonderful, hardworking educators all across this state.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. Well, under your leadership, Dr. Evans, TRS has accomplished quite a bit. Now, I know it might be asking a lot here, but if you could identify just one, do you have a single accomplishment that you are most proud of at TRS?
Wow, that's kind of tough, Everett. I'll say a single response, and then I'll add commentary, okay?
Understood. Fine.
I am most proud of the organizational culture that we have worked to build here at the Teachers Retirement System. Now, there are a couple of caveats that I need to make. We are not your typical state agency necessarily. We are a smaller agency of roughly 150 people on the plan side, and then we have roughly 45 people in our division of investment services. We are not directly state funded, so we are not always subject to the increases nor decreases that some of our sister agencies. Yet we serve over 500,000 people. So we've recognized that we're entrusted to be plan administrators for people who are one day going to retire as an educator. And they're going to be retired in many cases, in some cases, even longer than they work. And so they are counting on our retirement plan security to be there for the rest of their lives. And it takes a trained and dedicated staff to do all the many, many things that we do. So it has been a focus of ours to make sure that we have 7 operating divisions. And it's important that we don't have silos, that each of these divisions work well with one another. And I think that we're doing a better job today working together than maybe we did in years past. And it's taken a lot of work, but our team has responded so positively, and I'm so thankful for that.
Well, I've only been working here about 12 years, and I can attest that that is true. Early on in my career, for the small bit of work that I interacted with other divisions, it wasn't a lot. But now and today, it's much better. We can go to each other, we work together, and it's actually a pleasure to work along with. I didn't mean to sound surprised, but it's a pleasure to work along with some of the other divisions. So hats off to the team again there. Now, Dr. Evans, the Your Retirement in Focus podcast has been in rotation for 3 years now. Do you have a favorite podcast episode by chance?
Everett, if you think you're going to pull me into that trap, you are sadly mistaken, my friend. I could answer it 2 ways. I first of all wanted to say, well, I really get excited about those that you invite me to be a part of.
Well, yeah.
Okay. But you know what? I have loved listening to our colleagues and several people within our organization, and I can't call names because I will miss somebody. But when I hear other of our team members participate in a podcast for their very first time.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, man, it's like their first date, you know? It's like their, can I say this? It's like the first kiss. I mean, it's an experience. And also that they feel engaged and they're memorializing their professionalism through the medium of a podcast. And we will all grow as a result of that. But that is content that is going to be out there for people to access for an infinite amount of time, if you will, over some format or the other. And so that's really are the ones that get me excited when I've heard other people come on for the first time and participate in a podcast. So maybe you didn't trap me too much in that particular answer, but those would be the ones that I really, really like.
Well, I gave it my best shot, but I want to share this also. There's a member of my church who happens to be a Georgia educator. Oftentimes, I see him on his social media referring to many of his students as his favorite student. Matter of fact, he refers to all of his students as his favorite student. And that's the approach I'm going to take. I rarely copy anybody, but yeah, all of the podcast episodes are my favorite as well.
There you go.
Now, Dr. Evans, as we prepare to flip the calendar from 2022 to 2023, what are some of the things that you are looking forward to most in the coming year?
Everett, this is the time of the year where I'm getting ready for a new legislative session to begin. So with some degree of trepidation, I am certainly looking forward to the new legislative session. We have really an unprecedented amount of change that's going to be taking place in the Georgia legislature while we do have the same governor. We have a new lieutenant governor. We will have a new speaker of the House. We have a new chairman of a House appropriation. We have, I think, something like 25 or 30% of the legislative delegation has turned over for various reasons. So we've got a lot of new faces that we'll be working with to talk to them about the retirement system, about why it exists, the health of the retirement system, and inevitably the conversation about new retirement legislation of some type is going to happen. You know, it happens literally every year. And so it's going to be very, very important for us to talk about that. I can tell you that there is one piece of legislation that I understand has been drafted, which would allow employees in a school system in the areas of maintenance or transportation and food services to have a choice as to whether or not they would want to be a member of the teacher's retirement system or their public school employees' retirement system. Yes. I look forward to that conversation because it's always interesting to have that. I'm also sometimes concerned because, we are a defined benefit plan. Many defined benefit plans across the nation have had some form of change. So those are a couple of the things. Something that we have on our schedule or on our agenda to take place during the year is what I will refer to as a new round of strategic planning. When we implement a strategic plan here at the Teachers Retirement System, we typically are thinking of a 5-year plan, things that we're going to work on and achieve over 5 years. It's hard to believe, but it was 5 years ago when we last embarked upon a new strategic plan. We've got several new team members. We've got some of our team members who have been or in new positions. Mm-hmm. Things have changed in 5 years.
Sure they have.
So we're going to be embarking on the initiative of a new revised strategic plan where we will look at our current plan, assess how well we did on some of those types of things, see what we will carry over, but then also look into the future and think, what are those things that we need to be working on that will help make us an even better organization? So those are two of the things that I'm really excited about as I look into the calendar year 2023. I hope it's a great year in the equity markets. I hope that we end the year being able to talk about how positive our returns were. But these are somewhat challenging times as we think about the geopolitical issues that are out there, and we think about the fact that you don't go through the pandemic like we experienced without there being some longer term impacts to all of us, to all organizations, and to government as well. I'm just thankful that we can be here today and being able to talk about it.
As am I, sir. This is a question that we like to ask of most of our podcast guests, and that's because there's so much to be gained by the valuable insight and experience that our guests have to offer. What advice would you give to our listeners to better prepare for retirement?
First, I would say, begin planning early. Even that decision that one makes about becoming an educator is a form of retirement planning. Secondly, they can have confidence in their security of their TRS defined benefit plan. But I still want to encourage them to aggressively save and invest for the long term in their own defined contribution plan. I like to tell people that I'm not a financial advisor, but I do know that some of the happiest retirees that I get to work with are people who not only have their defined benefit plan, but people who made the decision to save 10, 15, 20, 25% of their salary and invest it over time. I will tell you, if an educator does that and works for 30 years, when they reach that point, money will not be an issue keeping them from having to continue to work if they don't want to.
Understood.
So begin planning early, save aggressively. And then the third thing that I would tell our members is at least 2 years out, plan a retirement planning session with one of our retirement counselors. Now, there are some things they can do in advance. They can go online, set up one of our online accounts, make sure their beneficiaries are who they want to be. Use our retirement planning calculator. And so they can go in and say, okay, if I'm going to retire in 10 years' time, here's what it looks like my salary is. Here's what it looks like my retirement benefit is going to be.
Yeah.
That way, I can make those adjustments in advance of making sure when that day comes, I can retire and I can retire comfortably because I made the right decisions along the way, helping to prepare me for one of the best stages of life, and that is being retired.
Yes, I especially like what you said, some people will be retired longer than they actually work. I'm hoping to fall into that category. Well, Dr. Evans, was there more you wanted to share? Or if not, are there any last words or bits of wisdom that you want to share before we let you go today?
Everett, I'd say 2 or 3 things. First of all, for our staff members, people who work here at TRS, our TRS family, I just want to say thanks to them for the work that they do. Be reminded that we are here to serve over 500,000 people. These are people who are depending on us. It is a great responsibility, and I'm so thankful of our team. Secondly, for our Georgia educators, thank you for choosing to be a Georgia educator.
Yes.
We look forward to you being one day one of the happiest people that I know, and that is retired educator. We're recording this here in the early part of December. Not exactly sure when your publication or release date is going to be. I just want to wish all of our educators, all of our team, a wonderful, wonderful holiday season and the most fantastic 2023 for all of us.
Yes, I agree. And thank you so much, Dr. Evans, for stopping by. On behalf of the entire podcast studio team, we always welcome you here. It's always a pleasure to have you here, and you have an open door to come back at any time. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in today. We encourage you to share the podcast with your family and your friends. And if you have questions, comments, or feedback, you can do that by sending them to podcast@trsga.com. That's podcast, podcast @trsga.com. Join us next time, next year, for TRS, Your Retirement in Focus.